We have some exciting new features to shout about in Katana today. Here in the LD&L team, we like to refer to this as the quality of life. If you caught our Foundry Live presentation earlier on in the year, you'll know that we have some big ideas of the steps we see Katana's LookDev toolset taking in the future. Since Katana 3.2, we've always intended for the network materials to be a multi-phased rollout, but we also recognize that the network material space wasn't quite where it could be at present. With that in mind, I'm really happy to introduce some of the changes that we've been making to elevate Katana look development with improving your artist experience at the forefront of our decisions. As a material designer, we know that being able to reuse areas of shaders between you and your colleagues is vital. Whilst we continue our journey towards live shading groups, Katana 5.0 takes a giant step in that direction by welcoming macros to our network material space. Users will notice that these macros work in exactly the same way as they've come to expect in the root node graph, meaning that you can now create and share materials or sections of your shader network between projects, users, and shows with ease. We've also added user parameter support to shading groups, allowing you to drive contained parameters with expressions from the top level for a more finite control of your material. We understand that Katana hasn't always been the easiest to learn. With Katana 5.0, we aim to simplify the learning curve of material creation by working towards a goal of what I'm seeing should be what I'm getting. We know that look development in Katana isn't always about handing over materials to your lighting artists. For the cases where we have new users or even texture artists coming into Katana to do look development for their dailies, we want to ensure that the network material process is as straightforward as possible for artists to create and reuse material shading groups. With that in mind, we've started investigating ways we can ensure that the material is accurately represented throughout the shader graph. One issue we encountered in previous versions was that the order of exposed parameters on a shading group wasn't respected through to the parent network material create. In Katana 5, ancestral nodes will inherit exposed parameter order from their child shading groups, meaning that you can now reorder parameters at any point in your graph and have these intuitively respected up to the parent group. You can also rename public interface parameters from the shading group to help avoid potential naming conflicts in the network material edit. Conflicts can now easily be resolved without needing to dive inside the inner shading groups, reducing the time wasted individually renaming exposed parameters and making it easy to detect and resolve network errors. We also want to continue to introduce functionality from the root node graph into the network material space, one of your most highly requested features being the teleport node. We observed that with a large number of studios, this was being used to manage the organization of the network. In Katana 5, we aim to tackle this first part of the teleport functionality by giving you the ability to hide the input connections of any node with a simple, user-friendly shortcut, so that you can easily remove visual clutter from complex networks. Katana 5 also delivers a range of updates to the network material interface that aim to streamline shader network creation and hand more power to the artist to customize how you work. To start with, our dot nodes are smaller, neater, and are now omnidirectional. They enforce straight edge connections for creating clean network templates that flow in any direction. We've also added a handy UI toggle for quickly switching your node's view state. And for when those nodes are collapsed, making connections between shading nodes has never been easier. Previously, making a connection could be a lengthy endeavor, with the need to switch between the node's view state often adding excessive clicks to the process. With Katana's new intuitive port filtering, minimized nodes will now auto-expand on cursor hover to show only the relevant ports based on the type of connection that you're making, turning a 4 or 5 click process into one swift movement. Beyond this, we've also tried to reduce the footprint of our nodes where possible by removing duplicate information and adding shortcuts or preferences to customize the node graph to your personal taste. You can see these changes both in the shorter node footers within the Network Material Create and Network Material Edit, and also in the new default connected-only view state. In this new state, page headers have been removed to reduce the visual clutter and to keep only the essential details in the Node UI. Boss pages are removed by default for those artists who prefer to have all of the information on screen. A new preference has been added to globally re-enable pages on all nodes that are in the connected-only state. In fact, wherever we can, we've handed the interface over to the artist, empowering you to make your own creative decisions with all of this and more in Katana 5. So that's all we have tonight from LookDev. We have so much more to share with you on the lighting side still to come. I'm going to hand you over to the lighting team to talk about some of the incredible work that they've been doing for Katana 5, including a look at the highly anticipated Nuke Interop. Over to you, Ariel.
Thank you, Charlie. So before we get to that, I'll go over some of the work we've been doing with USD and Hydra. And we began with updating our USD libraries from version 1911 to 2105. In order to achieve this, we've upgraded our VFX reference platform to 2020, which then enabled us to move a lot forwards. And so that's what I'll be showing you today. I'll start by touching on our history within that space. So previous to 2019, we were basically laying down the technical foundations for Katana. And then through to 2018, we were preparing the groundwork for the adoption of Hydra for our viewport. And at that point, we were the first CCC to ship with a Hydra-based viewport. So being a look dev and lighting tool, in the past, Katana has sat at the end of the pipeline chain. But now there's a need to work in a nonlinear way and to preview things such as look dev as early as the layout, animation, or other stages, if you want to view your assets in context before validating or signing off your work. So there's now a need to round trip, and we are committed to making that happen. As of Katana 4.0, we introduced the Usd Material Bake node, which uses the look file bake workflow we've had at the heart of Katana for a while. This is all available in a public repository as of Katana 4.0, and it enables us to export materials from Katana. We've seen today from Rory's presentation how material information can come out of Mari in the form of USD. So here we have Mari on the left, Katana on the right, and at the click of a button you can now export and package your assets with USD and then bring them into Katana. From which point we could then pick up these materials in our material editing context and make further changes, and then even push them back up the pipeline if we want to. So there are some very exciting possibilities there. What we've done for the upcoming release following the upgrade to USD 2105 is built on top of what we've already done. At this point, with Katana being a look dev and lighting tool, a missing piece of the puzzle was to bring light information in and out of Katana. And we can now do that through USD Lux, as we've expanded on our USD export tools to also support lights as well. So you can now author lights in Katana to then export them using our shader registry and then bring them back in. And once your lights have come back into Katana, it'll then be possible to pick them up in a Gaffer 3 node to make further changes as well. And this will all be open source in the USD plugins repository, so you can pick it up and build on it. We're using a new custom schema as well to enable functionalities such as exporting multiple light shaders on a single prim. And this all just makes for a very smooth and easy round trip, since USD Lux is very much a moving target at the moment. So in the future, this custom schema will be superseded by improvements in the USD Lux space, and then we'll be able to take a more universal approach. And so this is the very exciting work we've been doing around USD Lux. It means we can now set up both your materials and lights in Katana and then push that back up in the pipeline. And all of this is about removing that pipeline friction and being able to work seamlessly between departments. And this isn't all. We've made changes to our Hydra viewport, so we now fully support custom render delegates. With new options specifically for this purpose, you can now switch between delegates in order to preview in the Hydra viewer your materials and lights within that context. Some of our pre-existing options, such as enabling and disabling materials or lights, are still available, and we can see that switching to a custom delegate will respect those as well. And so this will be very much plug and play, since many of our render partners will be shipping a Hydra delegate within their plugins for Katana. And as you can see, switching to another delegate is very smooth and interactive. When enabling materials, by default, these will pick up USD preview surface materials and USD Lux lights, unless the render-specific material is present in the scene, in which case those will be used. There are options to pause or stop the delegates at any given time. Whether the delegates support one options versus the other or both of them is down to them. But it's all about gaining interactivity as you're working on your scenes. So you can free up your machine whilst you make changes, whilst you work and iterate on your scenes. And then once you're ready, you can resume the delegate. And this works across the different delegates that supports this feature. The delegate settings can be found within the display options at the top as well, so we can modify the settings for that delegate directly here. There are selection options, so you can choose how the elements are highlighted when selected inside the viewer. And there are also options for previewing purposes. That's if the USD document includes information relating to purposes, then you can be selective as to what you're previewing and untick the elements that you don't want to be seeing in the viewer. And so these are the really exciting things that are happening in our Hydra viewer, and we can't wait for you to give it a go, especially because one of the delegates available is our very own AVP, the Advanced Viewport. And this will be shipped with Katana, and it's the technology behind Modo and Mari. So we're very excited to have this integrated into Katana as a delegate. This is a GL renderer and includes features such as ambient occlusion, better shadows, transparencies, reflection. So it's all about having a better representation inside the viewer, a better experience when placing lights and authoring materials. So you can really harness the power of previewing your scenes at a really high quality. And this opens up a whole range of possibilities in the future. Whilst we're still on the topic of the Hydra viewer, I am very excited to show you another feature, which is around the topic of instancing. We can now view instances in the viewport. This will work with the various types of instances and functionalities that exist around that in Katana. How they are viewed isn't too different from how other elements are shown in the viewport. So you can selectively view the instances you need by just expanding them in the scene graph. If it contains bounding box information, you can also preview them as bounding boxes, so you can still get an idea of where they are inside the scene. This also supports nested instancing, so instances that are embedded within instances can also be previewed accurately in the viewport. So this is extremely useful, especially when we're working on scenes with lots of instances. We'll now be able to preview them without setting off the render. So we're very excited with where this can take us, since it paves the way for much more in the future. That's all there is from me, but it's not all the updates from the lighting team. So I'll now pass over to Gary, who is going to go over some of the work he's been pioneering with Nuke Interop. So without further ado, over to you, Gary.
Now, I'd like to talk about two exciting features in Katana 5. Those of you following us on social media may have recently seen a teaser for one of those features, but before I get to that, let me talk about the next step in our Foresight Rendering system. Just to recap for those of you who don't know, Foresight is our name for two unique abilities of Katana. The first is the ability to have multiple renders going at the same time, streaming pixels back to the interface. The other ability is for you to have those renders take place either on your personal machine, those on your immediate network, your render farm, and potentially even the cloud. This opened up a host of powerful options when combined with our extremely flexible shot and sequence-based workflows and the tools that enable you to iterate quickly and with confidence, like interactive render filters and render working sets. Artists were empowered to be more productive and creative than ever before. But Foresight, as it shipped in Katana 4.0, was designed with preview rendering in mind, and this was down to the way the underlying architecture works. We did ship with the ability to use it with live rendering, but because what was communicated through the live rendering system was just attribute changes, certain evaluations could result in an inaccurate picture. That's why we had live rendering through Foresight behind an environment variable and a warning about its limitations. What we've done for Katana 5.0 is completely changed the way the system works and how changes are communicated to the render process. Now you can start a live render on multiple shots at the same time, iterate on those shots that are running anywhere on your network, confident that what you are seeing is the correct picture in every render. This new rendering system we are calling Foresight Plus. Firstly, I'd like to show you some of the artist workflow aids we've built with Foresight Plus, and then bring it all together for you in a quick lighting example. Let's start with a single render and take a look at the Catalog tab. What you'll see is a number of the columns associated with graph state variables in the project, and they are all here with a new checkbox next to them. This is a new pinning feature that we've introduced. If you don't see your graph state variables in columns, you can add them by right-clicking on the column headers section of the Catalog tab. So what does this new pinning feature do? With everything pinned, when I make any changes to the graph state variables or the current frame, the live render doesn't update, totally ignores the changes, and it doesn't interrupt any renders that are taking place. The reason this is super useful becomes more apparent later on. Of course, there might be situations where you want to make changes to the live render through graph state changes, and that's just a click away. Here you can see I am cycling through the t-shirt that our hero is using by hooking into the USD variant attached to the character. But if I change the shot variable, the render totally ignores it, while the viewer and the scene graph tabs update to match the new value. To make this all work seamlessly, we've also introduced an addition to our expression syntax. Instead of taking the graph state variable from the project settings, which are just parameters on the root node, you can now get them from the context in which they are being rendered. Full details of this will be available in the documentation, but it's worth noting we aren't taking away the old system, and if you aren't using the new Foresight Plus feature, then you can carry on with what you have, just business as usual. The eagle-eyed Katana veterans amongst you may have noticed something else that is new in the Catalog tab, and that's the Sync to Project Settings checkbox at the top. For this one, let's have a look at 3 shots rendering at the same time. Each one has a different shot value and frame number. You'll see as I click between them in the catalogue, nothing changes in the viewer, the timeline, or the graph state variables list at the top. Now, when I turn on the new Sync to Project Settings option, as I click around the catalogue entries, all these tabs update to match. This speeds up your ability to maneuver between shots and stay in the artistic flow. On the surface, these things might seem like small changes, but now let's bring it all together and do a quick lighting addition to a sequence with that example I promised you earlier. Here we have 6 shots rendering at the same time. While I like the main key and the overall light through the window, with everything being lit that way, I think we need a foreground fill to help make everything pop a little more and to stop some of the characters being difficult to read. So let's turn on Sync to Project Settings and go to work. You'll notice immediately that the interface switches to match the current foreground catalogue entry, and we're ready to go. Taking advantage of the lighting tools from Katana 4.0, we quickly create and place the light where we want it, and with a quick double tap of the backtick key, we're back to looking through the render camera and tweaking the light values to dial in the exposure we like. When we're fairly happy with the first pass, we can have a look around at the other shots in the sequence and see if anything needs tweaking. I'm not a big fan of seeing the light in the TV screen. There's a couple of ways to stop this, but I decide to go with a quick light linking solution using the image-based selection tools. And there you go. This was all done in seconds on one machine, so imagine what you could do with the power of a farm. Foresight Plus really puts incredible power in the hands of the lighting artist to iterate quickly across as many shots as they want, while never dropping out of that creative flow. Next, I'm going to talk about something that has been eagerly anticipated, probably since Katana was first acquired by Foundry from Sony oh so many years ago, and it's the first step in bridging the gap between lighting and comp, Katana and Nuke, through a new Nuke interop framework. Those of you that joined us earlier in the year for other events saw an early proof of concept of this, where we demoed sending pixels to Nuke, through the comp and then back to Katana. Since then, we've rebuilt this proof of concept on top of the same framework that the Foresight Plus system is using, and started plumbing in some new features. Now, I can't show you everything that we're planning to deliver in the Katana 5 timeline, but I can start to tease you with some of the early possibilities and then talk you through what's coming next. In the demo we showed at other events, you had to have Nuke open and you could only stream a single render at a time. Let's first take a look at a very simple example using our scene from earlier. Here we're just sending a beauty pass to Nuke, running it through a couple of nodes in Nuke and viewing it inside Katana. This is just a preview comp and not a live version. Note that I've not even opened Nuke to have this comp take place. This is an extremely simple example, but what about sending multiple shots? Here's the 6 shots I was rendering earlier. The Nuke script has multiple entry points that allow for the user to see everything they need in a contact sheet UI, including additional data that is being fed by the Nuke script. But in later versions, this could be fed by metadata that is coming from Katana. Down the road, we'd also like to provide a single button that would allow you to make a daily from within Katana. No more sleepless nights wondering whether you have everything ready for your next conversation with the lighting, CG or VFX supervisor. Multiple shots isn't the only time you might want to send lots of renders to Nuke. What about multiple passes? Here we have one of the early shots that I've been iterating over, and while I finished some of the passes earlier, I was adding a rim light to one of the characters in its own pass to provide a little more separation. The click of a button, I can double check what the whole composition looks like in the context of the shot. Now, this is just a couple of simple examples that I can demonstrate with only the ability to send beauty passes and use Nuke in a preview comp mode, but that isn't all we have in mind for this first iteration. You'll have the choice to have Nuke open or headless, run preview comps or have a live session with data streaming back and forth, and to send multiple AOVs all at the same time. To keep on top of these exciting developments as well as many others across our suite of products, make sure to sign up to Foundry updates on your preferred social media channel. The goal of these 2 features and everything that you've seen today is to help artists work smarter and with less frustration by providing innovative but simple to use artistic tools and reducing the difficulty of moving between departments or applications by reducing pipeline friction. I'd love to hear which features are getting you the most excited from the presentation today, and what workflows would you like to see next from the closer relationship between Mari, Katana and Nuke. And on that note, thanks for listening to our presentation.